Es ist Zeit für Deutsch.
Hey, Dutchies, and welcome back to another episode of your PA Dutch Minute. Boy, do I have something great to share with all of you today. If you follow us on Facebook and Instagram, you'll know that right before Thanksgiving, I made a really big announcement about a new publication that was out. And I briefly just said, what it was and where you can get it. And I thought that's not good enough for our dear subscribers and our dear friends out there in social media land. So I upped the ante and I want to do a quick video for all of you guys more about this book so you really understand what it is, where it comes from, who is involved in this project, all of that good stuff. And there's no better person to ask than my co-author of this publication. So let's welcome my good friend and now your good friend, Michael Clay, onto the channel. Hello, Michael. Good to see you, my friend.
Goody dog, the dog, fish.
Ich bin all right, Michael. As most of the people that are watching this probably did see that commercial that I did, so to speak, back on earlier in November for the book. But let's talk to the people a little bit about this brand new publication, Heemkumme, Homecoming, a collection of Pennsylvania Dutch poems or Pennsylvania Dutch themed poems, where you wrote the poetry and I did the translation. I really want to pick your brain a little bit to let the people out there understand, like, where's this coming from? Who are you, of course? What's your tie to the Pennsylvania Dutch story? And I want to ask you this question first. So, Michael, what is your PA Dutch background or your story?
Sure. Well, if you look at both sides, of course, my last name is Clay, and that's very anglicized, but it actually is Klee. And the lineage goes back paternally back to Saarland in Germany. But I think it's about almost 9 generations here in Pennsylvania. And of course, a lot of history in Berks County. And then moved over to where I grew up in Perry County. And my mother's side of the family was Swiss Mennonite. In fact, there's the Mennonite and the Brethren in Christ Church background. So that is one that is other half of me.
Mm-hmm.
So if you will, a lot of different, I guess, roots that kind of go back into Pennsylvania Dutch, both what we would consider both plain and fancy. So
did you grow up hearing the language at all?
No, and that's one thing that I kind of wish I did. When we'd visit, Amish vendors and things like that, we'd hear it. But my grandmother on my mother's side grew up with it, and it didn't get passed on beyond that.
Yeah, typical story for a lot of people of our generation, for sure. But you got that rich Pennsylvania Dutch background. I ask you this question: so not everybody picks up a pen and just starts writing poetry. So, what was your inspiration for writing the type of poetry that we find in this book?
Sure, it was definitely kind of an evolution. If people buy the book, they'll see within the foreword that it was actually my maternal grandmother when she passed away. I found it very difficult to deal with. Excuse me. But and I can't explain why that poetry was this vehicle to express my grief. But and I still even not sure why it came to mind, is knowing that she had the Pennsylvania Dutch background. I felt that there was something important to add that, if you will, to this process of grief for me. So we ended up, or I should say, I ended up during the eulogy reading a poem, and actually a section of that was in Pennsylvania Dutch. It was actually, I learned the phrases from an ex-Amish woman who is a friend of my mother's. So she actually helped me do my first translation. And then, if you will, it just grew from there. This connection of both poetry, Pennsylvania Dutch, the history, the Pennsylvania Dutch narrative, and really, if you will, is how a lot of times it's presented, and it's not in a bad way, but Pennsylvania Dutch is Amish or it's Old Order Mennonite, and it's a lot more broader than that. And so these things just started to come to arise, kind of like self-identity, and just kind of like looking at, my own personal story and trying to develop my own personal narrative. And basically that's why this book is, if you will, it's a compendium of Pennsylvania Dutch aspects, Pennsylvania aspects as well.
Mhm.
And I think in trying to capture not only my own experience and thoughts and emotions towards the Pennsylvania Dutch narrative, but I feel like it would connect with a lot of people who are in my position.
We'll come back to that thought here in a little bit, but there was one other thing I wanted you to address. A lot of people, if they studied any poetry in school, it's the typical four-line stanzas. There's rhymes, and there's a rhyming pattern. But if people buy this book, you'll quickly realize that Michael's poetry doesn't necessarily follow that format. How would you describe the poetry that's in this book?
Well, okay, so I don't think there's an official poet school of poetry, but I like to consider it organic. And what I mean by that is there are times where you will see rhyme patterns, and for me, when I write poetry, I want it to make sense. I don't want it to be forced, but it's also not a negligence towards tradition. So, in some sense, if you will, the way I write is how I view this Dutch narrative, right? That that's authentic. It changes, it evolves, it still holds onto some tradition, but there's also new aspects that come into it, and so that's where, if you will, kind of my view of the Pennsylvania Dutch story is actually even represented in the way that it's written.
I like that. You briefly touched on this, but let's go a little deeper. So, in your mind, who is this collection of poems for? So we didn't say, and we should, in case anybody did miss that advertisement we did earlier in November. The book is a collection of 23 poems, and on one side of the page is the English, what Michael wrote, and then on the other side of the page is the Pennsylvania Dutch translation of Michael's work, which I did. So, in your opinion, as we put this book together, who is this collection for, and why should somebody buy it?
Well, if I'm gonna be honest, I think everybody, and not because I think it's not because it's just I think it's well written, but I think that there are so many aspects of it, even with such a small book that it is. There are just so many aspects that I think it could touch everybody. For those who still speak it, grew up with Pennsylvania Dutch, they're going to see it, in my opinion, formed in a different frame that is different from the old poetry. Those who like poetry, I think they'll enjoy it because it's got the gamut of representation, imagery, and so on and so forth. So I think there's a little bit of everything in there for people who like poetry. I really think it's something good for those who are students of the language. And what I mean by that is, I think it was probably a good challenge for you because we were using much more modern way of speaking, if you will, or framing of conversation. I think that would, if you will, kind of give more modern concepts of thinking within the language.
Yeah.
And sorry, if you go ahead if you want to.
No, go ahead, Michael.
No, one thing that I was sitting there thinking about what's so important about this, and one of the reasons why, and one of the main reasons to writing this is, I think that understanding the importance of language going beyond a novelty or just something for fun is tantamount for it to continue. In other words, I think people should do it for fun. I think that, it's a great thing to do, a great thing to learn, but it was, it was ubiquitous for our ancestors. And as time's gone by, I mean, obviously, you got your story, but for a lot of us who don't have the background, it's a novelty. But anyways, seeing this done and if you common ways of things like with poetry, I think it gives some effort to make it as something that is ubiquitous for ourselves, right?
Yeah.
And
So
I think that's where, in order for a language not only to survive but to thrive, it needs to have function. And so, here in this poetry, it's serving a function as well. And we've talked before where my hope is that we can get something moving with the language beyond just the learning aspect, but to actually make it functional. Like
yeah.
you can speak it to your children at home, you can speak it to people all around as long as they know. But and then that's where hopefully that this is kind of part of that process, right?
So two quick things that Michael brought up that are important for a lot of us out there in Dutchy world is that the Pennsylvania Dutch have always had a very rich tradition in poetry. The very first published book in Pennsylvania Dutch as we know it today was a collection of poetry. So I mean, we have this rich tradition back into the 1800s. So it was, this falls into that long story that we have as far as the Pennsylvania Dutch story. But as Michael said, and one of the challenges that, and I write about this in my forward to the book, is that I was doing, I've done tons of translation over the years, but most of the people I've always been translating have been dead, and they lived in a totally different time period than what I've ever experienced. I didn't grow up, farming with a horse and a plow, but getting the chance to translate Michael, someone from my own generation, his voice into Pennsylvania Dutch was somewhat of a challenge, but also extremely gratifying as well. So I thank you for allowing me the opportunity to work with you on this project. And I think it's time that we give these people a little bit of a teaser as to what they might experience if they purchase this book. And I asked Michael, what poem do we want to share with everybody? And he chose Flowers for Her Headstone. Real quick, would you like to give the background for this poem?
Absolutely. So this, as many parts of this book is geared towards, and basically a memorial to my maternal grandmother. This is actually one of them, and there's a lot of meaning found within this poem. But one thing that's always interesting from the poet's perspective is, I mean, I have my understanding and experience, but sometimes people will read it and get a completely different experience. So, like I said, I have my kind of private, and maybe one day if people run into me, maybe I'll tell more of the story because there's a lot to it. But anyways, it's definitely significant to me personally, but hopefully it connects with people.
Yeah. Well, if you would, please indulge us.
Absolutely. Flowers for her headstone. Your stone was bare and left alone. So I looked and found some flowers and sewn a patchwork quilt to cover your bones, so you wouldn't be cold even in the strong meridian breeze. I left those flowers there, watered with tears of joy and regret. Good memories came over like an unexpected storm, and I was born for a third time, raw and fresh and soft, ready for a whole new life.
And if you had the book, on one side would be that poem, and then here's the Pennsylvania Dutch. Blumen für ihr Grabstee. Die Stee war kahl und allein gelassen. So ich hab geguckt und hab die Blume gefunden und hab 'n Stickelteppich genäht zu decke dei Knochen, so as du net kalt wärst. Ewer in des kräftige Meridian Liftel. Ich hab zelle Blume dat gelassen, gewässert mit Tränen von Fried und Reih. Gute Gedächtnisse sind über mich kummer, wie der unerwartete Sturm. Und ich war für ein drittes Mal roh geboren und frisch und weich, ready for ein ganz neues Leben. Great poem, Michael. It's such a great poem. We also thought we'd do something special here for you as well. So that's just one of the poems, of course, in the book. We also decided we're going to give you a teaser on another poem, but we're going to reverse roles here. And you're not going to get to see this one, but we're going to read it. And Michael threw this idea by me. Hey, why don't you read the English, Doug? And he could read the Pennsylvania Dutch. And what was your thought behind this? Because I want the people to hear this.
Oh, absolutely. So I've learned languages elsewhere, particularly French. And if anyone's a language learner, the most difficult thing is trying to get over the embarrassment of pronunciation or saying something wrong, because it almost always brings a laugh to people, right? But I've learned, and it's still not easy. I'm still like, oh man, I can't believe I'm doing this. I want people to feel confident that it's okay to make mistakes, because that's the best way to learn, especially with language. So you got to try.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm going to.
So here we go. This is the last poem in the book, called The Dutch Story. I'm going to read the English, and then Michael's going to impress us with his Pennsylvania Dutch.
I hope so.
The Dutch Story. Some people stayed, some people went. Some people know, some people don't. Some of us care, some of us won't. Some are plain and some are fancy. Some are pious and follow Jesus. Some are pious and worship the earth. The story is tried and true, and it may live inside of you. And as long as it is told, this story will never grow old.
All right. Die Deutsche Geschichte. Der Leute sind geblieben. Der Leute sind gegangen. Der Leute wissen. Der Leute nicht. Der von uns geben drum. Der von uns waren nicht. Die sind plain und die sind fancy. Die sind fromm und folge Jesus. Die sind fromm und bäre die Erde. Das Geschiss ist brauchbar und wahr. Und es mag leben in dir drin. Und solange als es verzahlt ist, das Geschiss wird nimmer outwachsen.
There we go. Not bad, my friend. Not bad. He's right. The only way you're going to get better at this stuff is by doing it. Absolutely. So we hope this quick video here today wet your whistle a little bit. This is coming out in the beginning of December, and that means it is Christmas season for those of you that celebrate, or Belschnickel time for those of you that think the Belschnickel is going to come visit you. This would make a great gift. And we're not saying that just because we wrote it. Of course, we are saying it because we wrote it, but we also saying it because we truly believe in this project. And if you would like to get your own copy, we did publish through our good friends at Mastove Press. So if you are interested, and I'll have the link in the video notes below, Heemkumme Homecoming is available at Mastove Press at their website or at their store if you travel there to Morgantown for the low cost of $9.99. It's a beautiful publication. We want to give a shout out to our cover art. That is a watercolor by our good friend Jeff Marks, who's been on the channel before. We used one of his paintings because we thought it just fit perfectly with the story that we're trying to tell here. So you can get your own copy of Heemkumme Homecoming at Mastove's website. Again, I'll have the link in the notes below. And we would ask that you please share this with your friends and family. Like we said, it would make a great gift this holiday season, or birthday gift, or anything. You got, someone in your life that would appreciate this. You don't have to speak Pennsylvania Dutch to enjoy this poetry because the English is there. But as Michael said, if you're a student of the language, or you're trying to learn the language, or you already know it, there's that added bonus to that as well. Michael, from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for writing this poetry, because it was not only a pleasure to work with you in this project, but it also made me think about Pennsylvania poetry in a new light as well. So I want to thank you for that, and your contribution now to the expanding story of the Pennsylvania Dutch.
Thank you, Doc. I appreciate you being willing to translate for me. It really was a delight working with you, and it's just kind of a shout out. People see it in the book if they buy it, but I just remember when I started learning was about the time you started making those videos, and they were absolutely phenomenal for me. They were great stepping stone towards developing my understanding of the language. So I want to thank you and the work that you continue to do for the language itself and the culture as well.
Much appreciated. Thank you, Michael. Thank you. All right, people. Well, I'll tell you what more could you ask for? Get your copy of Heemkumme today. It'll mail right to your house. And while you're there, you can also check out all the great things that Mastove has, because they have a lot of other great publications. But also, if you're in that gift-giving mood and you're looking for something else for friends and family, don't forget we have our Zazzle shop, zazzle.com/PADutch101, where you can find Pennsylvania Dutch-themed merchandise, T-shirts, magnets, stickers, hoodies, all that stuff. Just check out the website. You can also, if you like what we're doing and you'd like to financially support the channel, you can buy me a coffee at buymeacoffee.com/Doug Mainford, or you can be a monthly patron on our Patreon. Just go to patreon.com/PADutch101 and follow us on social media. Check out our website, PADutch101.com. And also we're on Facebook, Instagram, and X. We'll keep that good Pennsylvania Dutch content coming as much as we can. Get out there, get your copy of Heemkumme. I guarantee you will enjoy it. Till next time, your friends, Schwetz Deutsch and Max Gut.
Max Gut, and don't forget to like and subscribe. And schlock that notification bell.